If everybody's ready, we'll call the meeting to order. This is a special budget session of the Bloomington Common Council. Do we call the roll on a night like this, Madam Clerk?
I would believe so.
All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay. Councilmember Rallo,
Here.
Bolin,
Here.
Rosenbarger, Scambolari,
Here.
Sims,
Here.
Flaherty,
Here.
Piedmont Smith,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Sandberg,
Here.
and back to Rosenbarger.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All present and accounted for. Tonight is the first of 4 nights of hearings for the 2022 fiscal year budget. Tonight we'll be hearing presentations from the Departments of Human Resources, City Clerk. Actually, I take it back. City Clerk will be presenting Wednesday night instead. That's a change to the schedule. The Legal Department, the Information Technology Services Department, the City Council Office itself, the Controller's Office, and the Office of the Mayor. But we'll begin tonight with an introduction and overview of the budget by the Mayor, general financial state of the city by the City Controller, Jeff Underwood, and a report on compensation and health insurance. With that, if everyone's ready, and that includes the Mayor, I see Mayor John Hamilton on camera. It's good to see you, Mr. Mayor. Please go ahead and begin your presentation. You will have 30 minutes.
Thanks very much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Great. Set my timer too, so I have that. I appreciate the chance to be with you tonight. And come on there we go. As you mentioned, is introducing the proposed budget, a chance to go through that with you all. And here we are again, hard to believe, still amid a pandemic. A year after we did this once already. We are still, in my view, framing this work in the decade of the 2020s, a critical decade, with a path forward that continues to emphasize 2 huge challenges. First, sustainability / climate change, and second, inclusion. Just 2 weeks ago, the International Panel on Climate Change gave what the UN Secretary General called a code red for humanity about the needs for responding to climate change. And also we know how important it is to assure there is a place for everyone in a very uncertain future with deep inequalities persisting. And of course, the pandemic is still with us a year later, indeed surging anew. Like 2021, as we did this budget a year ago, this is another rainy day budget. The big difference is this year, the federal help that we have, unlike the primarily city funded Recover Forward of a year ago covering this year, we now have substantial federal help, which makes a huge difference. As you know, a budget is a balance among many competing needs, interests, priorities. It involves literally hundreds of choices or trade-offs. We must sustain the basics, being able to practically and efficiently provide what people need and expect from city government. And we must try to reach farther, aim higher toward the future, the decade of the 2020s, to meet our obligations to the future and to be the community that we want to be. So this proposed budget you'll hear tonight and over the next 3 nights after tonight was developed with extensive input from all 9 of you council members, as well as from many local organizations, members of the public, of course, our department heads and their staffs. Since April, there has been extensive back and forth among this whole group of stakeholders about preferences and interests and priorities and goals. We had a city survey as well come out. And we sincerely, I and we in the administration sincerely appreciate and use all of this input. So tonight and this week, we will present proposed budgets reflecting all of this input and reflecting the balancing that has to happen to bring a fiscally responsible, a community responsible, a planet responsible budget, one that embodies the wide range of values held by our communities and that are reflected in our government. We will present budgets overall and also each of 17 departments plus the Office of the Mayor, and we are going to forward budgets, as mentioned, of 2 independent bodies, the council and the clerk of the city. I want to thank directly our cabinet, the department heads. You'll be hearing from all of them, all of our employees during this very, very challenging past 18 months that are not over. I'll particularly thank Jeff Underwood and his staff in the controller's office, who have done incredible work in challenging circumstances to assemble all of these budgets with help from members of the Office of the Mayor and, of course, many, many other people. Let me bring attention to a couple things. First, you'll see in virtually every budget memo 3 sections I want to note. One on COVID-19 and its impact, another on sustainability and climate, and each department's summary and introduction of some of the work they're doing, and then finally on equity and inclusion. Please look for those in each of the memos to highlight those areas. You will also see in several of the budget memos recover forward sections reflecting American Rescue Plan Act investments that we're proposing as part to help identify that funding source. And I'll also just note, as you usually do, you will find goals listed in each memo, each department, very specific, measurable, important goals filling all those memos, all for the importance of transparency and accountability, which we so support. The second framing item, just introduction, is it's worth noting, I think, this being my 6th budget presentation to you all, it's worth noting the enormous efforts that have gone into planning in the last 5 years together, and now, in many ways, a lot of implementing of plans that we have. In 2016, we began with 3 task forces, short-term on wage growth, on innovation, on fiscal responsibility. And then, of course, since then, we've had a comprehensive plan, a unified development ordinance, transportation plan, a sustainability plan, a climate action plan, parks and its new 5-year plan, fire with a strategic plan in the works to complete this year, police and their accreditation and the standards that they are adopting, the housing strategy document recently completed, sewer and water and new stormwater master plans at utilities, the hospital reuse master plan, transportation demand management strategy, parking study, et cetera. We will be reporting on progress on those several specific plans in the coming months, especially climate action, comprehensive and transportation plans. All of them inform the budget. And it's kind of important to note that framing that lies behind much of this. And of course, as I've mentioned, the American Rescue Plan Act and the CARES Act from last year, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, this year dramatically changed the context for this budget. So let me give an overall summary fiscally of the budget and then a few other topics, and then hand it over to Mr. Underwood. First, an overall summary. The budget presentation is about $179 million of overall appropriation and spending. 107 of that in the civil city, and then including 3 other departments, adding up to the total with utilities of about $44.5 million, Bloomington Transit about $15 million, and Bloomington Housing Authority about $12 million. This covers over 850 full-time equivalent employees, 17 departments. We like to remember there's more than $1 billion of assets that we are stewarding, protecting, investing in. You will hear tonight, we are proposing 17 new positions in city government, civil city, virtually all in public safety, which I'll go into soon. We're also proposing about $15 million in recovery from federal funding, focused on transforming the future. Let me go just a bit deeper into the fiscal overview. You'll recall that for this current year, a year ago, in developing the 2021 budget, we worked with $2 million of city reserve funding to support counter-cyclical investments, jobs, housing, safety net, and much that we needed during the pandemic. Our goal was to preserve reserves at 25% of operating annual funds, and we have done so. In 2022, we have a new opportunity with a fundamental reliance to address challenges with $1 million of CARES money and really about $10 million of American Rescue Plan Act money in the civil city, plus another $5 million of federal money flowing into Bloomington Transit and others into HAND and the Housing Authority and others. Just for context, the state, which determines the property tax levy, has set the 2022 levy to increase 4.3%. That is the highest in 15 years in terms of growth of that levy based on factors, as you know, at the state level of average income increase, et cetera, over 7 years. Our assessed value, we've just been learned, is up over $4 billion, more than 5%, a second year in a row of very healthy assessed value increase. But we also have learned that the local income tax projection for next year is down about 7%, reflecting a number of factors. We did expect it to go down, as we indicated to you a year ago this time. We will continue to be a low tax city in light of all of those factors, it looks like. Quick personnel overview. Our most important resource, as you know, are people. Again, thanks to our cabinet, all of our city employees for their extraordinary work these past 18 months of the pandemic. Our continuity of city government team continues to meet to assure our continued service. We will be continuing in the budget 1.5% of the personnel budget focused on training and investments. That's a tripling of what it was when I came into office. Continuing the COVID-related benefits, flex time, leave policies, et cetera, as well as the $100 wellness benefit for vaccine demonstration. Mentioned 3 new points in the budget. First, we know in union members of our employee base, union members are part of bargaining units that set their salary increases each year. All 3 of our unions, police, fire, and AFSCME, are under contracts for 2022 that determine those increases. For our non-union employees, this budget proposes a 2.75% increase on wages or salaries. That's the largest since I've been mayor, and I'm very proud to bring that to you. In addition, second, it also proposes a one-time $500 bonus, effectively, to every employee, union and non-union, for their service during this crisis. They have been fantastic. City government has not closed for 1 hour. The services have carried through extraordinary challenges. And in addition, regular part-time employees will be eligible for a $300 bonus to be paid in January. And finally, third, in terms of personnel, we will be planning to introduce a new paid family leave program in the latter half of 2022. There may be federal programs coming, but we are committed to providing a new paid family leave program. So I'm very pleased about all of that. Let me just note that you are going to hear a lot of things about budgets, I know, over the next 4 nights. Lots of details to come. I just want to highlight 2 big pictures for 2022, which are 1, public safety investments, and 2, are transformative investments in Recover Forward, moving us as a community forward. So first, on public safety, that most fundamental obligation of city government, in particular for the police department, that part of public safety, these have been challenging times. It's true for police forces everywhere in our country, including here. We've seen increasing gun presence, gun violence. We've, of course, had to deal with the pandemic and the stress it puts throughout our community and our people. We definitely see recruitment and retention issues like everywhere across the country again, including staffing. As you all know, I think we funded 100 sworn officer positions for 2021. Our current staffing is in the low 90s, despite very active recruiting and hiring, and despite new benefits that we've added, including substantial housing allowances and take-home cars for numbers of our sworn officers. We've had a lot of discussions and options being reviewed about how to deal with that internally with leadership, also with officers in the union. We've gotten feedback directly from the new Future Policing Task Force that's been set up to make recommendations. And the budget includes major investments in continuing to expand and transform our public safety efforts in police and beyond. And let me just highlight some of those. For the police department, several new components in the budget. First, funding for 5 more sworn officer positions, up to 105. In effect, that would let us net hire 12 or more officers over the 22 year between now and the end of 2022. Second, additionally, 5 new non-sworn officer positions, including 4 additional community service specialists. These also been known as neighborhood specialists. These are non-sworn officers, non-sworn positions who can help provide public safety services in many ways. And in addition, a new director of civilian operations, a non-sworn, overseeing much of the non-sworn operations of the police department. So those 5 new non-sworn positions. Third, the budget includes a $250,000 appropriation for a recruitment and retention pool. The details of how to invest that will be worked out with the police department members and others to identify the best ways to use that substantial new pool for recruitment and retention during 2022. In addition, we will be exploring a new physical location. Obviously, you know, the police department got hit hard, headquarters on 3rd Street during the flood of mid-June. We are relocating some folks and we are reviewing options for new physical location. And let me note just all those things I've just mentioned were actually generally the recent recommendations as well of that Future Policing Task Force, and we greatly appreciate their encouragement and their review and continued advice about that. We will also be implementing phase 1 of salary adjustments for senior leadership, a result of the salary study and the organizational assessment. The Fraternal Order of Police, just for the record, their negotiated salary increase will be 2.9% during 2022, plus, of course, the $500 bonus that I mentioned, and we will be negotiating in 2022 for the new contract for the Fraternal Order of Police. As the fire department component of public safety, we're planning, and the budget seeks 2 new positions of community care specialists. They really focus on health responses, health prevention, 2 new positions that we're very excited about, as well as a new assistant deputy chief for administration and planning, and as well for fire. As you know, we are exploring physical location, particularly related to the downtown station, which took it on the chin in the flood of June 18th, 19th. And finally, in public safety, the dispatch services, we're proposing 3.5 new frontline positions at dispatch. So in a way, as we've discussed in some settings, this is moving toward public safety as a more integrated and more diverse set of operations beyond just more traditional views of police and fire departments, both in terms of personnel and their work, as well as types of service delivery. So I look forward to happy to talk more about that if you like. Second major component of the budget, of course, is the transformative investments of Recover Forward 3.0. new transformative investments to let our city address major challenges and support investments to help our community move forward well. This includes federal money of $6 million very directly for transformative investments, really more than $10 million if you look at transit and housing authority and housing and neighborhood development as well. All of this filtered through the lenses of sustainability and inclusion equity. In jobs programs, green jobs, job programs focused on hard to employ individuals or groups of people, growth sectors of our economy, digital new economy, local agriculture, arts, investments in transforming us forward, as well as in housing, major proposed investments improving our sustainability and our inclusion equity in house and home ownership, in rental housing, as well as substantial additional investments for those experiencing homelessness beyond the 2021 appropriations, which you approved just last week. In addition, new investments in public infrastructure, again, through the lens of sustainability and inclusion on greenways, major investments in greenways, in trails, as you know, in lead line identification in the water system, in cyber and digital equity, as well as implementing plans quite explicitly for the climate action transportation plan with specific appropriations, a corridor study for College and Walnut, waste to energy study and review continuing, and many more things like that. You'll hear much about that in each of the departments that will be presenting those components. In addition, of course, there are ongoing transformative investments that are part of our city government beyond the America Rescue Plan, Recover Forward, including, you'll hear all-electric buses, plans now totaling up to 10 all-electric buses on the books. That's about 25% of our bus fleet. You'll hear about, of course, the housing authorities' conversions and rehabilitations of more than 200 public housing units, modernizing those, of course, continued investments from parks in our trails and such. As well, nearly $4 million of American Rescue Plan Act money that we would call basically revenue replacement, supporting basic services, including information technology, network security, fundamental telephone improvements, fundamental investments, revenue replacement in the Parks Department and Public Works Departments, both of which took major revenue hits during the pandemic, as well as some of these investments in public safety I've identified. So I won't go through in detail more programs and innovations that we have. You'll hear that from department heads through the evenings on energy and solar and efficiency and housing changes, parks, maintenance and upgrades in the new futsal court and the cemetery scatter garden and bicentennial trails and the jobs programs. I've talked about 1,000 households who mulch, these pilot innovation programs to help us revisit the leafing system that we have, as well as project management resources that you'll hear about, which will help us deal with major projects on our plate, like the hospital reuse, like the trades district, the arts facilities in front of us, housing, and so on, and the continued evolution in public safety. So I think I'm going to end without taking all of my time. I want to just note to close that these have been really tough times for many of us over the last 18 months of the pandemic. I want to explicitly note that our staff, from department heads to frontline, are quite stretched. These have been very challenging times to deliver city services. I'm very proud of the services that our city employees have given our community over these past 18 months. Just even one example of the incredible collaboration with the county, the health departments, the public education systems in dealing with the pandemic have just been exceptional, and they're typical of what our employees have done. I am sensitive to taking on too much. We have capacities to do what we can do. At the same time, this budget seeks to support our employees well, and also to move our community forward into recovery into this incredibly important decade of the 2020s responsibly, actively, toward a more sustainable and a more inclusive future. We appreciate your input. We appreciate your consideration, your feedback, and we'll be asking for your support for this budget. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Other than that, I'll be handing it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think in the past, we've heard the introduction and overview from the controller and from HR before we've taken questions. So if you don't mind, I think we're going to go that order. So stick around.
Sure.
And there is no, it's actually not in order for us to structure questioning during a committee of the whole. So I'm going to be asking council members tonight to adhere to 3 minutes per member per round of questioning, 3 minutes for comments per round per member, and any public comment to 2 minutes, as long as there's no objection from my colleagues. That's the rule I'll adhere to tonight. If there
Mr.
is
Chair.
objection, please let me know. Yes, Mr. Rallo.
Well, I do have an objection.
Okay, please.
I think that there are items in this budget that deserves necessary scrutiny, and I think that that would entail longer than 3 minutes per council member. I'm not saying that every item in this budget will require that, but I think that certain departmental budgets will require it. And I think I feel really duty bound to do it in a public fashion at a council meeting rather than by written, in a written form. So if we could allow actually more time, that would be helpful.
I mean, this is the times recommended to me by leadership in the council office. I do want to keep an eye on our time, and I would ask you to try at least to keep your question to 3 minutes, at least be aware of the clock. I think you'll be surprised to find, I mean, it's important for you when asking your question to keep the person who's answering to your 3 minute limit. It's not about you, it's about the answer. So with all due respect, you know, I understand your concern, but I also would ask you to, I mean, there will be plenty of extra rounds for questions. So I think you'll be able to get your questions asked tonight.
Yes, well, yes and no. I think that certain topics, certain departments, I'll have very few questions. Certain ones I'll have more, and I would like the chair to have, you know, the discretion, the allowance to drill down and to this is one of our most important duties on the council. It's a fiduciary responsibility of the city.
Understood.
You know, the priorities and so forth. And so
Again, I understand that.
I'll adhere to it.
Thank you.
Opposed
I'm
objection.
just asking you to keep an eye on the clock, okay? Especially when getting answers. Councilmember Scambolari.
Thank you. Could you clarify, Mr. Chair, is there a limit on the number of rounds of questions?
There isn't. Not under what I've just described, which is why I think Mr. Rowell will be accommodated.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah. With that, let's go
Thank you.
now to, thank you. Any other concerns before we go on? We're going to hear now from Mr. Jeffrey Underwood, our intrepid controller. Hello, sir.
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, please go ahead. You'll have
All right.
15 minutes.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Okay.
Not seeing it. Does anybody else see the screen? There we go. Well, no, that's the blue sky timer. Okay. We see your screen now.
All right. Let's see. All right. Everybody can see that now?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. Before I get deep into my section, I'd like to thank a number of people, the mayor and deputy mayor, for their support during this process. All my fellow department heads who at times I'm sure wanted to yell and scream at me about things. Especially would like to thank in the mayor's office, Elizabeth and Andrew, who did especially Elizabeth Yeoman's work in helping us get prepared for tonight and rehearsing everyone and many other things. I'd like to thank the controller's office, my staff for putting up with us and putting up with during this time, but especially like to thank Deputy Controller Jeff McMillan, Julie Martindale, our procurement manager, and Cheryl Gilliland, who is our new director of budget and internal auditing. I thought last year was tough. It was a tough year for me with all my surgeries. I thought 2021 is going to be better, but it's not been a good year for the controller's office. As you know, we lost a member of our staff earlier this year in a tragic accident. And just in the last 4 weeks, 2 out of the 4 people that I just mentioned have had serious medical issues, and one lost a family member, a close family member over the weekend. So in spite of all that, we all pulled together, got the budget submitted, and we're looking for some sleep, hopefully later this week. But again, thanks to everyone that helped out there. So moving in, as we enter year 2 of the pandemic, we have continued to adjust, persevere, and overcome. We've asked department heads to continue to conserve spending both in the current year and last year. In 2020, we saw significant reductions in our revenues for street, parks, food and beverage, and our parking operations as well. We've seen some recovery. However, we don't expect to see a full return to normal for the foreseeable future. It'll all depend on, do we get to stay open? Are we going to close down? What's going to happen? The good news is, as the mayor said, we received significant assistance via CARES, the Corona AIDS Relief and Economic Safety Act, and ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds. And the uses of those funds are reflected in this 2022 budget request. We will continue to monitor economic and fiscal conditions, and we're going to use caution with the pace of our investments. We're going to stay nimble and ready to adjust over the next 18 months. Cash reserves, we ended 2020 with reserves between the city general fund and the rainy day fund of 38.8%. As a reminder, our target is 4 months or 33.3%. So put this in perspective, this would allow us to pay approximately 4.5 months of the city's general fund expenditure if we didn't receive any other revenues. We're projecting these levels to be 29.1% and 23.6% at the end of 2021 and 22 respectively. And I'll show you that chart later on. I would add that based on our updated 18-month projection, we expect 2021 to end, 2022 to end at actually 25%, which is the target that we set with the Recover Forward use of funds. Talk about revenues, property taxes. This is the significant source of revenue for the city general fund and the parks general fund, as well as accumulated capital development fund. It also pays for general obligation bonds. In the city general fund, property taxes represent 53.7% of the total revenues. And as the mayor noted, that's an increase of 4.3% for 2022. The local income tax, these funds are collected and remitted by the state. LIT is composed of 3 categories: distributive shares, which goes to all of the units of government except for the school system, public safety, and economic development. And those 2 go to the 4 municipalities, the county, the city, Ellettsville, and Steinsville. The general fund receives the city's portion of the distributive shares, and this represents 26.5% of the total revenue. So as you can see, these 2 combined are just over 80% of the total revenues of the city's major operating fund. The city also receives public safety, local income tax, and those funds will be discussed later in this memo. As noted, as a result of the extension for filing tax returns, if you remember, the state extended the time last year significantly that people could file their 2019 tax returns. That we got a larger increase in our local income tax last year. This year, because of that, they're showing that we're going to actually have a reduction of just over $1 million or 7.8% for 2022. City miscellaneous revenues, these are such things as fees for service, fines, interest income, and so on. They account for about 20% of this total. Just wanted to note on the rainy day fund, as a part of the 2021 budget, we utilized $2 million from that fund in order to provide funding for Recover Forward initiatives, and we're not proposing to utilize any of that fund in 2022. that will account for the majority of the decrease in our miscellaneous revenues for 2022. Expenditures. The overall total budget, this does not include utilities, transit, or Bloomington Housing Authority, is just over $106 million, which is an increase of $11.5 million or 12.1%. This increase is overwhelmingly supported by the CARES funds of $1 million and ARPA funds of $9.7 million. Without these critical one-time resources, there would have actually been a decrease in the overall budget of $216,000, which was 0.0002%, I think, decrease. So I didn't even put that in. On the general fund, the overall budget request is $49.9 million. This is an increase of $1.35 million or 2.8. This reflects $1 million worth of CARES expenditures. And the one good news is a $224,000 decrease in our estimated property tax caps. Adjusting for these items, the general fund budget represents a 1.2% change in comparison to 2021. Parks General Fund, the overall budget request is $9.7 million. This is an increase of 1.3 or 15.5%. As I stated, the primary public safety income tax, the primary use of that stream is to fund public safety answering point, or central dispatches for short. We expect to receive in 2022 just over $6 million in PS Lit and $1.3 million in E911 revenue. And those are generated from the state to the city and then distributed there as well. To break down of that is for central dispatch, $2.9 million in PS Lit and 1.3 in E911, and then $3.1 million for police and fire. I've got some additional exhibits here, but I want to thank you now for your deliberations and consideration of the 22 budget proposal. There are difficult choices that have been made to make this presentation, and we look forward to your questions as well. To give you some sense on the overall city budget, this is what we call a breakdown by function. So you can see we have public safety, parks and recreation, capital, the administrative services, and tax caps on this form. And it's good to note that 83% of the total budget is what we call forward facing, or that's to the public. It services directly to the public or for the public. And our administrative, which would be like legal control or HR, mayor's office, you can see that represents only 8% of the total budget. Our budget is done in 4 categories. Category 1 is personnel costs. Category 2 is supplies. Category 3 is outside services. And category 4 is capital. And as you can see by this, services account for 30%, but personnel of the entire $106 million is over 53%. People are the city. So want to point that out. If we look just at the city and parks general fund and look by function, you can see again that overwhelmingly the majority of money goes to outward facing, 82% again, as I said, and only 13% for the administrative piece of that. Then when we look at the categories, again, the largest single number in our parks and city general fund, again, the 2 largest operating funds of the city, 73% represents personnel costs. As the mayor said, 4.3% growth in the levy. That's the largest in 15 years. Again, that is based on the 7-year average of non-farm income statewide. The other interesting thing to note is this applies to every unit of government in the state of Indiana. We all get the same growth quotient, regardless of local economics. We all get the same thing. I would like to note that you can see from the chart 2015 and 2016, which are 2.6 and 2.7, will be dropping off this year and next year. So as long as we continue to see good growth in wages, then we should continue to see good growth in our levy as well. I know this is a little tiny, but this is the form I put together every year to show the projected reserves. As I noted earlier, we ended up in 2020 with 38.8%. We're projecting 29.1 and 23.6. And this is based on the actual budget. When we updated it for the 18-month projection, which is what the budget process is based on, we think that number will be closer to 25%, which is the target that we set forth. This just represents the various budgets for the general fund that lists each one of those, and you'll hear from each department over the next 4 nights and what comprises their increases or decreases. But again, 2.78 and adjusted a little over 1.2% and 15% for the Parks Department. Our historic cash balances, this goes all the way back to 2008. You can see we have seen steady growth in those cash balances. So we've been good fiscal stewards of that money. We did end the year at 38.8 after a high of 50.5. But again, that was planned use of some of those reserves to help stimulate the economy. Next up is the fire department and their 10-year PS Lit budget. And you can see the request this year is $1.17 million. And then you can see various years plus future projects that have been identified, but have not been put in a particular year yet, and tend to be larger expenditures that we would look at alternative funding. Same for the police department. Their request this year is $1.34 million. So a total PS Lit in capital request of $2.5 million. And then finally, and again, very hard to read, but it's a little, you do have a copy of this that we sent out that breaks out all the other capital requests by department, by fund for the city. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and I will be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. I think we'll go now to, I believe, Caroline Shaw, who's going to give us an overview of compensation and health insurance. Is Ms. Shaw in the room?
Yes, good evening, council members. I'm having technical difficulty, so I was just trying to call in. So I'll go ahead and get started. And
You're coming in loud and clear. So
oh, good. We'll all
yeah.
cross our fingers. Heather was helping me.
All right, please go ahead. You'll
Okay.
have, I believe, 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, ready to go.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Oh,
Please
good.
go
Okay.
ahead.
I just need to pull up my notes really quickly.
Sure.
The technical difficulty just threw me off my game just a little bit, so I apologize. Good news is my presentation should not take the full amount of time. Good evening, council members. Caroline Shaw, Human Resources Director. This is the first of my 2 presentations this evening. First, just a brief overview. In 2017 and 2018, we completed the first salary survey at the city in over 20 years. This was for both union and non-union positions. The non-union market adjustments were implemented over 3 years. And the last non-union adjustments were completed in 2020. Council members and the mayor deferred those adjustments until 2020, and those same market studies helped inform the last contract negotiations. Our budget includes the following increases to base pay: 2.75% for civil city and elected officials, contractual increases for AFSCME 2.5%, and police at 2.9%, and fire at 2%. Our common law or temporary employees will also receive at a minimum the new living wage of $14.01. Just some brief highlights that you'll see in the budget. Personnel continues to be on line 121 at 7.65% for FICA, and line 122 is our Public Employees Retirement Fund, which is 14.2% for civil city and 21.5% for our sworn public safety employees. Our medical insurance, the city of Bloomington has been a member of AIM, formerly IACT, since January of 2011. And in 2010, they were 4 charter member municipalities of the medical trust. It is now 48 member cities and towns with over 4,100 employees and over 10,000 covered lives, including dependents. The city continues to have a leadership role by serving on the Medical Trust Board of Trustees and on the underwriting committee. In 2021, our medical insurance renewal rate is projected to be no more than 0%. We're currently budgeting $14,274 for all benefits for employees in category 1. Okay, this figure shows the city's medical insurance rates to medical trend compared to medical trend over the last 11 years. The third column is the amount of money the city saved each year by joining the medical trust if you assume our rates would have been at least equal to the medical trend. The difference is calculated the difference in dollars is calculated in the third column. As you can see, our participation in the AIM Medical Trust has saved the city over $32 million and provided constant stability. That's an approximate number, but a good story for sure. Even though in 2019, we had a significantly higher annual renewal rate due to our catastrophic claims, our average annual renewal has been right around 5%. So with regard to COVID-19 employee support, as the mayor's talked about it quite a bit, we've done several things, including implementing emergency paid leave and expanded family medical leave for all employees as of April 1st, just after the pandemic was announced. And in January of 2021, we were able to offer a health insurance premium holiday for all of our employees. So no one paid health insurance premiums that month, which that was big. And that was also through the AIM Medical Trust. Additional things we've done for employees include additional benefit time and additional mental health resources, and also the vaccine wellness incentive that many of you have participated in, and we thank you for that. Dental and vision insurance. Dental plans remain self-funded and administered through our third-party administrator, and the vision plans are still fully insured. We do not plan any substantive changes in 2021. These next 2 slides list several other benefits that we offer our benefit eligible employees. And I won't read through all those. You can just take a quick look at that. And these are some of the other benefits. In conclusion of our compensation and benefits presentation, I would like to show you a sample benefit statement for a non-union employee who makes an annual base salary of $50,000. Insurance and wellness are a little over $14,000, including another $7,100 in PERF contributions by the city, and over $7,000 for paid time off, which now includes additional city holiday that the mayor created just last Juneteenth. The totals over $78,000, and if you add another almost $4,000 paid on behalf of the employee for Social Security and Medicare, the total value of this employee's salary is well over $82,000. This concludes the first of my 2 presentations this evening, and I thank you for your consideration of the 2022 compensation and budget request. I'm happy to answer any questions, and it looks like I did okay on time considering my technical issues. I do apologize for that.
You
everyone.
did excellently on time. We thank you. We thank everyone
Thank
for
you.
their presentation. And I also want to express on behalf of the council our condolences to the Controller's Department and the very difficult year that they've endured, and our best wishes to every member of the department. So with that, let me open the floor to questions for the mayor, the controller, or the HR director. I'm having trouble seeing, gallery, here we go. I see Councilmember Sandberg, followed by Councilmember Piedmont Smith, Rollo, and Scambolery. We'll start with Councilmember Sandberg. And again, we're limiting question bites of the apple, question and answer to 3 minutes. So try to ask the department head to keep to your time. Councilmember Sandberg, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I have most of my questions for the mayor, but I want to start with Ms. Shaw since she is the last to present. And my question has to do with the salary compensation survey that was done and the ranges of salaries that were already approved by this body for BPD leadership. That's the lieutenants, the captains, the deputy chief. Is it true that we have the authority now, we have the ability now within those ranges that have already been approved to increase those salaries now? And is it my understanding that those are being phased in now? Like over a 2-year period, when we have the option to do that now, if it is the will of this administration or this council?
I will take the first part of that question, Councilmember Sandberg. The pay grades that I introduced last year during the budget process and the salary ordinance amendments do give us some flexibility on pay increases. And I'm not sure where we stand on that currently.
Okay, and again, I appreciate that. I will definitely be doing some following up questions with people who may be able to provide that. But I have
Looks like Mr. Underwood looks like he.
I can jump
concern
in.
about the phasing in when we have an issue with the VP. So yeah, thank you.
This is Chuff Underwood, Controller. Maybe I can answer that question for you. As you'll remember, we did a 3-year phase in for everyone else. We have elected to do a 2-year phase in, and I can tell you that will be a weighted phase in where more will happen in 2022 than 2023. Part of it is related to balancing the budget, but so again, I think we'll see most of that come into play in 2022.
Mr. Underwood, is it my understanding that the BPD budget actually has it in their budget now to actually consider that, or is that not factual?
No, not in the 2021 budget. That would be additional funding that would be needed.
It wasn't already, that range was not already approved by the council.
The ranges in the salary ordinances are. That means that salaries can be set anywhere in there. The funding piece of it is actually in the appropriation, and that was not included in the 21 budget.
You have 30 more seconds if you'd like.
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go now to Councilmember Piedmont Smith. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. This is for Mr. Underwood, and thank you very much for your overview presentation. And I wanted to ask, so when I look at the summary of general fund and fund balances on page 10 of our packet, so there is, if you revenues minus expenditures is negative $2.4 million. So I understand 1 million will come from CARES funds. Where's the other 1.4 million coming from to get us to a balanced budget?
That will come out of cash reserves. That's why you see at the bottom of that exhibit 38, 29, and 23.
All right, I was a bit confused because I thought the memo also said that there was no use of rainy day funds.
We're not proposing, this will come out of the general fund balance, not out of the rainy. We're not proposing a transfer out of the rainy day fund at all this year.
Okay, so reserves is separate.
Yes, unappropriated funds left in the general fund.
All right, great. My other question is, how is the Parks General Fund funded? Is that property taxes, or where does that revenue come from?
Yes, they receive property tax. They receive some miscellaneous revenues, and then the rest of that is parks fees, program fees, rentals.
Okay. There's significant increase there, but I'll ask that when we get to parks. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll go now to Councilmember Rallo. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you all for the presentation. Mayor Hamilton, I had a question regarding your focus on a specific priority, and that is public safety. I agree with your basic premise that you regard it as a fundamental obligation, as you put it. My concern is that, as I see it, the investments are misplaced, and that is to say that what we seem to be lacking are, as we know, sworn officers. Now, I realize you've increased the number, but the problem is recruitment and retention, which requires a base salary that's competitive. And I think that we're not going to essentially raise the number to anything approaching 105 unless we increase salaries or we lower standards, which we ought not do. So I appreciate your attention to it, but I don't see the need for the community resource officers. I see the need for actually trained sworn officers. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think we probably agree on a lot of that. I would say that we believe very strongly in continuing to invest in and evolve an innovative police department. We feel very strongly that the addition, for example, of social workers and community resource specialists, community service specialists are a substantial enhancement to the overall work that the police department is doing. A lot of what the police department has been doing is getting asked to deal with a lot of complicated issues that may not need a sworn officer. We believe a balanced approach, much as we did last year, where we're increasing investments in the sworn officer group, as well as increasing investments in the non-sworn, is a way to proceed. The Future Policing Task Force agreed with that. That's a group of community folks that we've engaged to help think about the future of policing. I would say we take very seriously the request, and I hope you do too, for $250,000 for recruitment and retention. That's a very substantial dollar amount that is being asked for to be used for recruitment and retention.
Would that include base salary?
It's really going to be up to the department and us to try to determine what's the most effective use of that. It could be used for compensation.
Would you be supportive of that?
I am supportive of an engagement to look at how can we do the best job to increase recruitment and retention of sworn officers, which that is focused on.
Okay, that's what I'll be focusing on too.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go now to Councilmember Scambolery.
Yes, thank
Left
you.
3 minutes.
Mayor Hamilton, since we're in the neighborhood, why don't we continue on the 250,000? If I'm understanding correctly, that's one-time money, correct? In other words, there's no guarantee that that will appear from year to year.
That is correct. That's
Okay.
one-time appropriation for 2022. We will be negotiating the contract during 2022 for subsequent compensation years.
Okay, and if I remember your words correctly, you said that we haven't decided how to use that. That will be up to some discretion of the police department. But have you put any bumper guards on that or parameters on how it may or may not be spent?
I don't think I would say we have. I think we've kicked around several different ideas. You know, we did the take-home cars, we did housing allowances, we've considered lots of different options, and we'll be looking forward to discussions with the officers and the leadership and frankly, the Future Policing Task Force and you guys about what you think good uses of that would be.
And aside from the take-home cars and the housing allowance, and I'm familiar with those two, what else have you considered? What other ideas have even popped up?
Well, I don't think I want to go through because I'll leave some out, but you know, they could be in recruitment incentives, either directly or indirectly for referrals or for hiring. They could be other kinds of compensation bonuses, or they could be seniority. They could be rewards for staying with the department. There's lots of different things that we would want to talk about what will be most effective in terms of recruitment and retention.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to get some of those on the record for now.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton. Mr. Underwood? If you want to pop back on.
He's left the building.
Who could blame him? So I'm sure you'll be really surprised to know that I'm going to ask about cash reserves and debt service. Let's start with debt service. If I remember the pie graph correctly, our debt service is at about 2% of our budget.
Yes.
My general question, how do we feel about that? How is our debt per capita? How does that compare to other cities our size?
I think we've been very judicious in our use of debt, especially property tax debt. We actually paid off one of our, we're down to 27 seconds already. That was, We actually paid off the Showers Building bond this year, so that's a good one, and that freed up about $300,000 in the general fund. I think we continue to be a low per capita city. I think we make good decisions that we only fund long-term needs with debt, and
let's put a pause on it there. Let's see if other members, we can come back to Councilmember Scambaluri
sorry.
and to that question. No, but thank you. Are there other members with questions for the mayor, the controller, or the HR director? Councilmember Smith, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, President Baldwin. The question,
I'm not the president. I'm just the chair. Just call me Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Mhm.
Thanks to everybody for a presentation. I realize it's a lot of work and it's very complicated. What I'd like to ask about is the number of officers on the BPD. In my mind, the crux of the issue is the number of officers that are active and able to serve our community. The DOJ says we should have a ratio of 1.6 per thousand. And I think Bloomington has about 1.1. The organizational assessment recommended that we have 120 officers, and we're existing somewhere in the 90s. So it worries me that the stress in the system, right now, the officers are doing mandatory overtime, and they don't seem to have enough staff. And we have a increasingly complicated environment of crime and needs in our community, and we all want everybody to be safe. So Mayor Hamilton, is there any plans to get us to 120 officers to fulfill the recommendations of the organizational assessment? And if not, what do you think we can do for the future?
Well, thank you for the question. And of course, you're welcome. You may want to get into details with Chief Dekoff too tomorrow night. I'll just make a couple brief comments. One on the reference to ratios of persons, officers to the public per capita. They reflect full numbers of positions, not just who is available on a given time. We have people who are on military duty. We have people who are on injured reserve and those kinds of things. And so those numbers do not reflect that. Plus, of course, we have an Indiana University police force that most people don't count, which covers a great number of people in our community too, when they look at those kind of ratios. And they're not meant to be a prescription of every community. What it should have is kind of a national average. So we certainly pay attention to those, but they're not a Bible about how many folks. I'll also note on the organizational assessment, that was really an exercise done based upon 1/3 of every sworn officer's time not answering calls, but doing preventive and community-based work. And if you did have that protocol, that does require more officers. That's not our typical structure for officers, is to hold them for 1/3 of their time not answering calls. So it's really complicated, but we are fully committed to providing the resources to protect the public safety.
Well done.
Thank you.
Further questions from council members, first round questions? Any first round members who have not asked a question yet? If not, I'll take an opportunity. Give me 3 minutes, please. I do want to point out that, the police budget is tomorrow night. And I think that both, there's going to be questions from members in more detail about the police budget. So I hope that Chief Dekoff is ready to field as many of them as he can. But I guess I would ask in general, Mr. Mayor, what do you see as the horizon for sort of different thinking about fire, police, animal control together?
Well, I think we're already moving into that. Again, I'll look for guidance from you all, as well as from the Future Policing Task Force and the Board of Public Safety and other entities that look at those things. We're already starting to create some of those intermediate places of service and types of people and types of service delivery that I think we should continue to do. I think if substantial annexation proceeds, that will prompt a good time to look at that as well. But in the meantime, we're continuing to really explore that. I think if you compare the police force and the fire department in 2022 with what they look like in 2016, there's been major shifts in how we've tried to evolve that way, and I think very good ones. And I'll just put in a plug. We're hosting the first national police social worker conference in Bloomington, Indiana. The first one in the country is going to be held in October. So we're really a leader in trying to innovate that way.
Secondly, with respect to headquarters, you've now mentioned that because of the flood, the police headquarters, you're looking at a new one, a replacement one in the same place or somewhere else in the city. What's the story on headquarters for both police and fire?
I think the answer to that question is yes. We're looking at all of that. We're looking at all those options.
Okay, so but I mean, what's the possibility that either headquarters will stay where they currently are? That just get
I mean,
rebuilt or built
I
bigger?
wouldn't want to say that it's impossible. They would. I think we're examining all the options, including staying where they are, moving to a new place, sharing space, renting, building, buying, all kinds of options to look at.
But it sounds like it perhaps might be unlikely that they would stay where they were because of the flooding issues.
I don't want to forecast exactly what will be, but it's certainly a serious issue we're having to look at because particularly for the fire department building is really in a difficult position and difficult to use as it is currently structured.
Very good. Thank you. With that, I'll go to questions from members. I see some second round questions. Councilmember Rallo, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton. So I think we see things slightly differently, and perhaps tomorrow we can go through some numbers, but I see numbers regarding staffing of the police department, our pay ranking compared to other cities, and particularly recruitment and retention is distressing. I know that you're looking at this $250,000 as maybe applied to recruitment and retention. It seems, I mean, we can talk about numbers tomorrow, but it seems like a small amount relative to the need. But, my concern is that attrition is essentially taking away our best trained officers. And we're basically just keeping parity. We're just keeping up with new recruits, which means that we have essentially more and more rookies taking those positions. I find this distressing. And so I think that given the recommendations and communications that we've had in the past, my only priority actually at this budget advance was public safety and applying some resources to this need. I want you to, maybe reflect on that, but also tell us specifically, what do the resource officers that you propose to hire, what will they do? And what will they do that's apart from a sworn officer that a sworn officer couldn't do themselves?
Well, let me say, I'm incredibly proud of our police department, and I don't accept, I guess, the characterization that suggesting that we are not well trained and not well equipped and not well able to provide excellent services to the community. We have one of the best police departments in the state, if not the country, and I'm really proud of them. And we're going to continue to work to help make that keep that true. I don't think it's that the community service specialists do things that a sworn officer cannot do. It's more that they do some things that a sworn officer need not do as a sworn officer. Just as an example, there may be calls of service for a broken car window or for a traffic accident filing, non-personal injury traffic accident, or for other kinds of police calls, even welfare checks in certain circumstances where there's a lot of evidence and demonstrations around the country that we can adjust the kinds of personnel who can respond to the wide range of service calls that police officers do.
Are those service calls the ones that are required right now? That we require this type of personnel?
The goal, and again, you can certainly talk to the chief about this tomorrow. The goal is to increase the capacity overall of the police department to respond to the service calls and to triage, if you will, or to classify which kind of response is needed, whether it's fire, EMS, police, sworn officer, non-sworn officer, et cetera, and to expand our capacity to respond to those calls, as well as to prevent problems through wellness checks and others. Sorry.
Well, data would be welcome in
You
that.
have another chance to ask questions, Mr. Rallo. Let's go to Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. My question again is from Mr. Mayor, and that has to do with the future of policing task force. My question has to do with, have their recommendations been made, have been released in any form to the public's consideration and our consideration, or are they strictly serving as an advisory body to you at this point? I'm very interested in some of the specifics that they are perhaps recommending based on their research, and maybe how well they're coordinating with the Bloomington Police Department, getting data from them, and also coordinating perhaps with the Board of Public Safety. So what can you tell us about where we can find information coming directly from this task force?
Sure, and let me be clear. This is an independent, self-organized group that runs its meetings and sets its agenda, asks us from the city administration for information. We did share some of the outlines of budget proposals with that group and asked for their direct feedback, which they could have chosen not to do or did, but they gave some of that direct feedback, which I'm sharing with you. I certainly welcome you or anybody to reach out to that group. They do not report to us or me or council or administration, but are a group of independent residents who are looking at this and making advice. So we shared these categories of ideas with them and said, how do you react to them? We're planning the budget. We'd love to get your feedback. And that's where that came from. And I don't know that they've published that. We certainly welcome, however they want to share that with folks.
I would certainly welcome any of those members to certainly attend, especially when we're discussing the police budget, to perhaps weigh in during public comment. I would welcome.
Sure.
Councilor Sandberg, just so you know, you're freezing a little bit sometimes. So just it doesn't seem like it's affected your time, but just so you know that you're freezing occasionally.
It's a bad internet connection. I've had it all day long. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear it. We'll go now to Councilmember Sims. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And if I do freeze, and I am having the same unstable internet issues.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everyone for the presentation so far. Mayor Hamilton, while you were speaking, you mentioned with regard to our badged officer count about IUPD or counting IUPD. Can you expound on that a little bit more? I've heard that, a couple years of budget work, and I'm not quite sure how that fits into counting. And if we're going to count them, why not the sheriff's department? Why not some of the state police that's running, that sort of thing? So can you expound on that just a bit?
Sure. And I really only mention that in the context of the people saying what a national standard of officers per 100,000 ratio should be. And I think again, there are problems with using those kind of ratios directly, mathematically, if you will, but they can be guidance or helpful. I think in a city like Bloomington, if you're looking at the number of sworn officers who are serving the population of 85,000 or 80,000 or whatever our number is, you do need to think about not just the Bloomington Police Department, but also the IU Police Department, which directly provides sworn officer service to many residents of our community, many of whom are university students, university campus, and that kind of thing. So it's really only in relation to people saying what is the ratio of officers to population. Sheriff I wouldn't include them, or state police. They're kind of more a general coverage, but IU police do provide direct service to a lot of our residents.
Okay, thank you. And we'll talk more about that. In particular, how far they expand away from campus boundaries with regard to helping members in this community, but we can get into that a little bit later. Also too, and we mentioned, and I do agree that our department is well-trained and well-equipped. One of the issues that I'm hearing is that we are now losing training time because we don't have enough officers to do basic duties. So one of the sacrifices potentially is actually training time. So I'm concerned about maintaining that well-trained status if in fact we don't have actually time to train. So, and I think that is related to number of officers. Not so much what Councilmember Smith raised, which I think is a good point, but I think that matters whether it's 120, 105, or 92 with regard to the time for training to maintain the standards we want of our officers. In 15 seconds, can you just touch on that, please?
Well, we totally agree on the importance of training. We're deeply committed to that. We do 4 times the state required training and have a commitment to continue to extensive training of our officers. There's no sacrifice on that.
Thank you, Mr. President, for those questions. Do we have any other second round questions from members? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to take the opportunity to ask the mayor about the census figures, which I know have an impact on funding that we may get from the federal level. We only have preliminary figures at this point, but they seem to be quite inaccurate in the view of most people who are familiar with Bloomington. Mayor Hamilton, can you speak at all to whether we have a chance to contest those figures or what you may foresee is the impact of the census?
Well, I don't think the numbers are credible. It's not, there's lots of research starting into that. We certainly will avail ourselves of every opportunity to try to get those numbers corrected / adjusted. We're identifying that now. You know, doing a census count starting the week after a university sends tens of thousands of students home is not going to be a credible way to get the real count of folks. So we're very concerned about it. It does have impacts. So we're going to be trying to do everything we can in the legal field of appeals or lawsuits or others to try to get the right number.
And can you speak at all as to what federal funding may be impacted by the numbers?
I can't really in any detail now yet do that. You know, for this 2022 budget, I don't think we foresee substantial impact, not that I've heard, but we are certainly digging into that. It's important.
Okay, thank you.
Further second round questions from members. Councilmember Scambaluri. 3
Yes,
minutes.
thank you. Have I done second round? No, I've just done. one
Yes,
round.
this is your second round, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Quick question for Mayor Hamilton, and then Mr. Underwood, I'll come back to you on cash reserves. Mayor Hamilton, you mentioned the Director of Civilian Operations as a proposed position for the 2022 budget. Do we have a job description or draft of one at this point or no?
I don't know the answer to that. Not
Okay.
sure.
Ms. Shaw, if you want to chime in on that?
Yes, we do have a very rough draft of that, actually. And it needs to be cleaned up a bit, but we'll be able to share that at some point.
Do you have a sense of when?
As soon as I'm finished with my presentation day, I'll like the next this week. It's always a busy time. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I think we're looking at kind of some interesting structural changes in the police
Yes,
department.
yes.
And I think how we're conceptualizing that position matters a lot.
Absolutely. We'll prioritize that, council member. We will do our best.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood, I'm assuming you're back. What a surprise. I'm asking you about cash reserves again. From end of year 21, 29.1% to 23.6%. I understand very clearly that we are in a pandemic and it is raining. You know, it is kind of monsoon season in some way. I wouldn't call that a precipitous drop in our reserves, but it's noteworthy. Can you say something to reassure me? I guess is what is.
Yes, again, just to state that we think we'll actually be at 25%.
Right.
So that was a planned spend down. The GFOA, the Government Financiers Officers Association, recommends 2 months or 17%. So our goal is to stay at least 3 months. My hope is once we get through this pandemic, we'll look to build that back up to the 4-month period. But the good news is we have those funds available to us. The other good news is we've seen considerable federal funding come through that allows for the replacement of some of those revenues. The CARES Act, again, $1 million for 2022, and the ARPA funding, which allows us to calculate lost revenues and use those funds to replace those to the tune of about $6.2 million over the next couple of years. So, you know, a lot of it will depend on if the impact of the, but I'm hopeful that we put together a good plan. It's a balance between healthy reserves and stimulating the economy. But certainly,
Thank you. And have you projected out, I'm sorry, my time's elapsing, so.
not beyond
Have you
2022.
projected out to 23 or 24?
Not yet, because there's so many unknowns at this point.
Okay, and I'm out, so thanks.
We'll go on. Any other second round questions? By the way, kudos to the joke about a precipitous drop in the rainy day fund. I like that. Any other second round questions? Councilmember Smith. 3 minutes.
This would be to Mr. Underwood or Mayor Hamilton. Bloomington ranks 7th in population size and 16th in Fraternal Order of Police average pay. The average across the state is about 67,000, and I realize that Indianapolis is included in it. And Bloomington ranks at about 59,000. So it looks to me like there's a gap. There's a gap in bringing our officers up to an average pay for those across the state. Is there no way to structure the budget so that what we can do is begin the process of bringing up our officers to a competitive wage that is closer to the average across the state?
Mr. Underwood is detailed involved in the bargaining unit negotiations, which I know often involve trading salary on the one hand for other benefits on the other. That is choosing separate pay for training licenses or separate pay for seniority or other things that aren't captured in the base pay. So I know it's very complicated to try to compare apples to apples because each bargaining unit across the state seeks a different balance. Some seek a more direct, I want the base pay to be as high as possible. Others want more seniority or more retirement benefits or other things like that. So we certainly believe in fair compensation. We negotiate that way to achieve that. And we're going to continue to try to make sure we have the best police officers in the state. And I appreciate your support for the kind of funding. Again, you know, we're asking for funding for 17 new positions in the Public Safety Department. Is quite a major investment we're asking for, and that $250,000, which I think is important. But Mr. Underwood may want to give more texture to that than I can with his detailed knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add what the mayor said is it is very difficult, and we look across the state and try to come up with averages that are inclusive of all the benefits. And in Bloomington, you might say that the base pay is low, but we have a number of add-ons that the union has negotiated: longevity, education, training. In addition to that, the pension wage as well. So it's a balancing act of those, and it's a negotiation. So we try to look at all of those factors in comparison across, as well as how do they compare to other employees at the city, and strike a fair balance there.
That's time.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton. Thank you, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any further second round questions? See none, we'll do one more round of questions. I see Councilmember Sandberg and then Councilmember Rallo. 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am truly concerned about the Bloomington Police Department budget. And so, can you hear me? Am I breaking up?
No, you're doing great.
Okay. Some of us have been doing our own research and doing some.
Okay, you just broke up.
But some of us have thought that if we could just come $5,000 for base pay for all Bloomington police officers, that would raise us up to 48. Now, if we could do more, if we could raise them up $10,000, we could get up to 28. If we really wanted to be competitive in a competitive market for well-trained police officers, and make no mistake about it, our officers are well-trained. They're good. They do a good job for us. The problem is we're losing them to other jurisdictions who pay them more. And so some of us are sounding the alarm here. And I just kind of want to know what your sense of urgency is about being competitive to keep our good officers that are well-trained, well-disciplined, a point of pride for all of us in this community. But we're burning them out. We're wearing them out. And we're going to have to do some pretty serious maneuvering here in order to be competitive amongst the state of Indiana. Even Indianapolis is having trouble recruiting the number of officers they need in order to be not just reactive, but proactive, all this public safety that we all want in this community. So, I don't know if you can speak to that or not. Do you feel the same sense of urgency that some of us do from having talked to our officers that are currently stressed to a point that I think is almost bordering on a crisis?
I didn't hear every word, but I think I got the gist of it. I certainly take extremely seriously the challenges in our police department, as in many police departments, in recruiting and retention. It's been an issue building for years. I think we absolutely, I've come to you with a serious and very aggressive budget proposal to expand resources in public safety. I will say, I think, and again, look forward to advice from the Future Policing Task Force and others, appreciate your advice. I do think that this bidding and competition for police officers is not going away in the short term. And it is imperative to think about public safety at a high level and at a broad view, including all of the resources and services that can help protect public safety, help prevent problems, help respond to them in a very broad-minded way. And that's what we're trying to do. Certainly, I take very seriously the importance of our sworn police force and working with them to make sure we have the resources that we need.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Councilmember Baralo, 3 minutes.
I'll pick up where Susan left off, and that is to say, well, first of all, let me step back and say I have nothing but the greatest respect for our police force. That's why I'm concerned about it. Data indicates that though we have an attrition problem, we're not able to attract and retain police compared to other cities in the state, and therefore all the training that goes in is essentially benefited. Other communities benefit from that. We're never able to get to the number that we hope to because we're only doing our best to stay in place. So this presents a real problem. And I don't see, I mean, again, I'm straining to find out what exactly these resource community service specialists will do that a sworn officer can't do. It seems to me that they'll encounter emergencies, they'll encounter violence, they'll encounter overdoses, and we want the best trained people to be there to do that. Otherwise, they're going to be calling sworn officers in to essentially assist them. So why not invest in the sworn officers? And what I mean by that is have the compensation that we can attract, retain, and reach the number of 105 instead of going the route of a community service specialist that it's far from clear exactly what they'll be doing that a sworn officer can't be doing.
So thank you for the question. Appreciate the input. I guess I'm trying to say, I don't think most of these, for example, a community service specialist is not doing something that a sworn officer could not do. Our sworn officers are very capable. They're very well trained, but maybe let me just give an example. We may get a sworn officer that could get called 4 times in a day for a welfare check on the same person. There could be a 911 call saying there's somebody asleep and passed out on a park bench and we need to have a welfare check done. A sworn officer can definitely do that 4 times in a day. It's not clear that that's the best use of these highly trained professional officers. There may be other people, whether it's a fire, one of these new health specialists, or whether it's a community service specialist, who may be able to respond to that situation just as positively and just maybe even more effectively than a sworn police officer. So that's what I'm talking about, looking at the broader picture of public safety as a whole and how we provide the services to keep our community safe.
But you admit that they would call a sworn officer in many cases. So
they call dispatch. They call dispatch, and then dispatch needs to decide who goes. Is it an ambulance? Is it a fire truck? Is it a police officer? Or is it somebody else? And that triage or that assignment is a really important decision for public safety, who gets sent to the calls. The citizens, residents don't typically know who needs to be sent. They describe the situation and we have protocols to evaluate who gets sent to the calls.
Mr. Rollo, I don't see any other people asking questions. If you want to continue.
Well, again, let's address the attrition problem. It's clear that we rank very low in terms of compensation in the state. That's why we're not able to attract and retain officers. And this has been ongoing for, as you say, Mayor Hamilton, several years now. So, and it is manifest by having essentially a lower number of officers than we need as a city. Therefore, it's increasing the likelihood for mandatory overtime for officers that are relatively new. We're losing our most experienced officers and to other cities. And I think that this is essentially, as Councilmember Sandberg said, taking us to a trajectory that has a bad outcome. Because tired, demoralized, underpaid officers who are working mandatory overtime are much more likely to make mistakes. And I think that that is, I'd like to hear you reflect on that, because that seems to be the data that I'm seeing. I don't know what data you're seeing. We can go through it, but I'm sure that you're looking at some of the same data that I am in terms of staffing, recruitment, retention, ranking of salaries compared to other cities and so forth.
Again, appreciate your input on that. We do look at some of that data. We've talked about the difficulties of comparing salaries between different bargaining units that bargain for different things. I'll just give you an example. Fire in 2022 bargained for a 2% rate increase, salary increase, compared to police 2.9. Fire asked for other things than basic salary increase. Now that will show up. They wanted relatively more other kinds of benefits. And that's what happens in a bargaining situation. That happens in police departments all across the state. Be that as it may, we are incredibly proud of our police department. We have great officers. We are fully committed to helping continue the leadership of our department in providing public safety. You are absolutely correct that it's a tough environment. For many reasons, there are fewer people seem to be wanting to become police officers. We are not lowering our standards, and we are committed to continuing that. And we are continuing and committed to continuing to review this big picture of public safety. How do we provide public safety, the full range, from a critical response team, a SWAT team, all the way to social workers and everything in between. And that's really important to review and look at how we do that in the current environment, including a $250,000 recruitment and retention pool is a very substantial investment that we're asking you to make, and I hope you'll support that.
Let's go on to another question. Councilmember Scambolery, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And I appreciate your comments, Mayor, about the $250,000 fund. I also agree that different incentives are meaningful to different individuals. So the flexibility of that fund, as we've talked about it so far anyway, is very interesting to me, and I'm glad to see it. Has there been any talk of making a multi-year commitment to such a fund? I realize budget isn't passed until we pass it, but has there been any discussion or consideration in your office to making a multi-year commitment to exactly that kind of fund?
Well, I'll let the controller talk about that as well. We don't ask for a multi-year commitment, you would have to appropriate funds every year for that, and I can't commit you ahead of time. We do expect that next year's bargaining will focus on a 3-year contract with the police, for example. That's typically what we do. And that will involve multi-year commitments for a labor contract like that. But for this fund, it's really focused on the very short term, next 18 months. What are some things that we think we can do with the police department to address what is this absolutely a serious challenge?
Okay. Just to nudge a little bit more, that sounded like a no. That sounds like, no, we'll do this one time, but it's not something we're considering into the future. We're going to rely on contract negotiations to make things better. Am I hearing that correctly?
Well, you asked if we considered a multi-year fund like the $250,000 fund. I think we are focused on an 18-month between now and the end of 2022. What can we do to help recruit and retain? And in the meantime, we will be negotiating and talking about what do we do starting January 2023. We're definitely open to different kinds of funds like that, but this is focused on the 2022 budget.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for now.
Councilmember Flaherty, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just had a brief follow-up on the same theme, thought triggered by Mr. Underwood. He mentioned that, and Mayor Hamilton as well, that it can be rather difficult to compare salaries across departments for many of the reasons you already cited, but that you sort of endeavor to do so in contract negotiations, and just so we have a sense of what is fair, what's competitive. Is that feasible to share with us? I realize the imperfection of comparing different types of compensation packages, but we've heard base salary figures and rankings cited a number of times, but we've also heard, I think accurately, that does not reflect the full picture. But to help us get closer to what the full picture is, could the administration share with us, their best attempts at benchmarking with other, larger cities in Indiana in terms of what the full compensation package and structure looks like, given not just base salary, but other types of things that we may do that other departments don't, or vice versa? Is that possible, or is that not feasible in this budget context?
I will let HR Director Caroline Shaw jump in as well, but I would, in the short term, encourage you to look at the police and fire, the public safety salary ordinance. You will see all the different types of compensation that are allowable and how those are assigned. So you can get some idea of what's the possible range of compensation, and be happy to let Caroline jump in here as well.
Sure, and I'll just note that I'm more specifically interested in, as a comparison to the departments we may be competing, for lack of a better word, for retaining or recruiting officers from.
I'll just add, Councilmember Flaherty, I think that's a really good point you make, and we do try to do that every time we're in negotiations, but it's constantly moving, right? Different police departments are at different phases in their contract negotiation process, and it's a heavy lift coming up with a really straightforward apples to apples comparison, or digging down to that. So really good point, though.
Is it fair to say we'd have a better idea of that next year while contract negotiations are actually ongoing, in terms of that kind of comparison?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask this clearly a common thread tonight, and this is a question I've been wanting to ask, and I think I've asked before. Can I have 3 minutes? Thanks. From 2004 to 2012, in the previous administration, they set out to increase the number of sworn officers from 84 to 100, an average of 2 a year. And when pressed, the police department at the time said that was the rate at which they thought they could recruit a net increase in officers. And this was at a time when our department was more competitive, and it's still, because of the bottleneck at the academy, it's hard to recruit more than net 2 new officers a year. Whether we have 100 or 105 officers, if we have only 92 who currently occupy the positions, why does anyone realistically think that we can increase the number of bodies in positions at a rate of more than 2 net a year, especially in this economy where we're under extreme competition from other cities. And this is a question I would ask of any officer present, as well as, of the mayor, the controller, HR, or the police union. And they can write me or talk during public comment or during the police department budget. But Mr. Mayor, what would you and your staff say to that particular challenge here?
Respectfully, these are complicated questions and times in terms of hiring sworn officers. I would certainly not predict what we can do. We've hired, I believe I've seen in the numbers since I've been mayor over 6 years, something like 70 officers that we've hired, close to that. That's certainly far more than two net. The question of retirements or departures is another question, of course, that gets you to your net. But we've certainly been able to bring in significant numbers of folks, and we are very focused on how do we keep growing the department, both in sworn officers and non-sworn officers. And I think that's the right focus.
Okay, I would just follow up and say, the net per year, an average of 2 per year net was our growth at that time. And we are now, not very much farther than we were then. There was a time we didn't increase the officers net, but now it's time to do it. But anyway, if there's no other follow-up answer, I'll end it there. We should get to public comment. I think that, I'm pretty sure that that's the appropriate thing at this point. Is that right, Ms.?
It is, yes.
Okay. So with that, if there's any member of the public who would like to speak to the budget overall, this is an opportunity to do so. You'll have 2 minutes. If you would like to speak to what you have heard so far, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat and the meeting host will acknowledge you. Is there anyone who would like to speak as a member of the public to the 2022 budget introduction? I'm not sure who is it.
I do not see any raised hands presently, and I do not have any messages in the chat. If you want to give just another.
We'll wait another few seconds. Again, if you would like to speak to the 2022 budget introduction, to the budget in general, we welcome your comments. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat and Ms. Lacey will acknowledge you. We'll wait another 10, 15 seconds. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat. 5 seconds. And barring no public comment, we'll come back to the next budget presentation. I want to thank the mayor and Mr. Underwood and Ms. Shaw for their presentations and their extensive answers to our questions. Let's go now to Ms. Shaw, who's going to present the next item in the budget, which is the HR department's budget. Ms. Shaw, please go ahead.
Good evening, council. Bear with me just a minute.
Yeah, you'll have 10 minutes as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, and I have to say I'm relieved to hear I'm not the only one having internet connection issues this evening. I'm in very good company, it looks like.
Yeah, it's going around.
It is. This is the second of my 2 presentations this evening, and this one's our HR budget. By utilizing innovative best practices in human resources management, the HR department exists to create a positive, productive, and inclusive work environment that attracts, retains, and develops talent in order to accomplish our many organizational goals. Just to give you a brief background, we have 6.6 full-time equivalents in HR, 1 current vacancy. We still need to hire a special projects manager, and 3 of us are now certified professionals with the Society of Human Resources Management, so I'm very proud of that. We spent a lot of time working on COVID, as you know. There were no layoffs nor any stoppage of services or operations due to the pandemic. We're very proud of that and our employees. We know they've worked very, very hard. And at the mayor's discretion, we initiated the continuity of mayor's direction, rather. We initiated the continuity of city government team who continues to make recommendations to the mayor regarding city policies employee safety and protocols, and staffing plans. We partner with our risk management team and legal to develop processes to keep our employees safe. And risk and HR have developed processes for screening symptomatic employees, notifying exposed employees, and managing our return to work for those required to quarantine. And although 91 of our employees had COVID, none of these have infected their coworkers or infected by their coworkers to our knowledge. We developed a policy and process for giving our employees paid leave at the beginning of the pandemic, right at April 1st, I believe we kicked that right off. And that gave up 2 weeks of emergency paid leave for all employees, even public safety, and also allowed for expanded emergency paid leave, expanded family medical leave at 60% pay. With regard to diversity and inclusion, most of our regular employees have already participated in implicit bias training this year. And our city leaders, you, our department heads, and you, our elected officials, and our department heads will participate in anti-racism training that'll kick off later this fall. We're very excited about that. This slide lists all of our 2021 budget goals, which I'm happy to take questions on at the conclusion of my presentation. But as I have already mentioned, a significant number of these goals have been sidelined by COVID-related time and focus. Hope I didn't go too quickly on that. We have 4 programs in HR, and the first of which is staffing. Our first goal under staffing is to implement and maintain strategies to increase the diversity and total number of qualified applicants for position vacancies. And then secondly, we will complete the final phase of organizational assessments by the end of Q3. Our Parks Department had done a separate organizational assessment focused on the Switchyard Park when we first kicked these off, and now we're going to wrap them up and conclude with one led by the Novak team. Compliance is another one of our programs. We train a goal is to train at least 75% of managers on the hiring process and on the Family Medical Leave Act and the American Disabilities Act in 2022. And we're also requiring a 45-minute diversity and inclusion training and preventing sexual harassment training for all supervisors. Human resources staff will participate in employment law and our compliance training by the end of Q4. Lots of training going on in HR. Employee relations is a very, another one of our programs, which relates to all things related to employees, including employee policy, performance, employee complaints, discipline, negotiations, and management coaching. It's a very full category for us. Goals in 2022 include successfully negotiating, along with other members of our negotiation team, a collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME by the end of Q4, and then the same for our police department, which is what we've been talking about rather extensively this evening. I've already mentioned this other one. We are requiring this additional training for supervisors on sexual harassment. And then we will take necessary steps to improve department head satisfaction rates using our internal service department survey by the end of Q4. Additional goals include researching options for a potential merit pay process in 2023, purchasing a platform for managing an outcomes-based employee wellness plan by end of Q4, and issuing a request for proposal for a city employee health clinic by the end of Q1. This is something we've talked about for years. We've got some ideas, but we're going to issue an RFP to see who we can partner with on that. More goals for compensation, benefits, and employee development include reviewing all of our benefits by Q2 to ensure that the benefits package has its best balance between cost, quality of coverage, and customer service. Implementing an electronic form or other electronic solution to make changes to benefits or benefit elections. We still do a lot of paper in that regard, and we're trying to find more efficient ways to do that. And then developing and implementing a paid family leave by the end of Q4, which we're very excited about. And the mayor's already mentioned, this was actually planned for our 2021 budget, but sidelined by the COVID leave that we implemented unexpectedly. And then finally, by Q4, we plan and otherwise prepare for a classification study to be completed in 2023 to ensure civil city positions are properly classified by pay grade and the FLSA classification. This will allow us to start beginning mini salary surveys in 2024. The Human Resources Department will also receive an additional $500,000 in ARPA funds in 2022, and this will be to cover the bonuses the mayor's already mentioned. So as you know, throughout the pandemic, our city employees never stop working and providing services to our residents. In addition to other COVID-related support that we provide our employees, the American Rescue Plan Act allows us this one-time recognition of their dedicated service by doing the COVID bonus pay, 500 for full-time regular employees and 300 for part-time. This is just a summary of our budget in HR. The general fund request for 2022 is $882,000. And I'll just briefly go over some highlights. In personnel, the request is $743,000, and that represents an increase of about $96,000 over the prior year, and reflects the cost, our estimated cost of implementing a paid family leave program in 2022 at $85,000, and then another 2.75 cost of living increase for all our regular full-time and part-time employees in HR. Supplies line does not change in 2022. Other services is just a $12,000 increase over the initial request or the previous year's request. And that's some annual licensing costs for some employee training software, but trains on any number of things. We're really excited about that. And that's an additional $12,000. This slide is a summary of our HR budget, all the things that I've talked about in more detail. And here's a slide of the ARPA fund summary, which is separate from. The 2022 Human Resources budget request reflects increases that align with our mission to create a positive, productive, and inclusive environment that attracts, retains, and develops talent in order to accomplish our organizational goals. I thank you for your consideration of our budget. I'm happy to take questions at this time. And I hope I got through without any sort of technical issues.
Seems to have been pretty smooth.
Yay, thank you.
All right, if you could unshare your screen,
Yes.
we'll go to questions for the HR budget from members. I see Councilmember Piedmont Smith. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So I, under the sustainability heading, it says human resources supports sustainability initiatives in 2 ways. And one of them is to incentivize employees to avoid driving their personal vehicles to work. Could you expound upon that and whether a parking cash out program has been considered as part of that?
So currently, those 2 initiatives I'm referring to are the bicycle commuter program, where we give employees money to be used locally at bicycle shops who commute to work on their bicycle for X number of days in a month. The other is, I believe it's the Bloomington Transit. We could all ride our bus for free with our city employee ID. And we have talked about some options with parking. That's a, Mr. Underwood, do you want to share anything about that? I haven't been closely involved with those conversations, but I did talk to a couple of you about a week ago in detail about that.
It's certainly one of the items on the table, and we're trying to gather data about that and consider it as part of the bigger package.
I'm sorry, what do you mean part of a bigger package, Mr. Underwood?
Of all the benefits that we have. So look, we you'll basis look at all the benefits as well as the sustainability of those programs.
So is parking cash out something that you're considering for next budget year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, how was the estimate of $85,000 for the paid family leave arrived at, and how long is the paid family leave program? How many weeks?
So we were doing lots of research on this at the end of 2019 with our O'Neill School Service Corps Fellow. And that number, $85,000, was based on actual family leave requests by employees requesting to go on leave for births or adoptions. And the $85,000 was based on just recovering the employee cost of that at 100% pay for 6 weeks. And the program, as I said, we will spend the next, most of 2022 doing more research on it and trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this going forward.
So are you making the assumption then that if somebody is on paid family leave, the city will hire somebody as a temporary and pay them exactly the same as what the person on leave gets?
I think it's fair to assume that if if somebody's on paid family leave for a period of time, that we will have to cover the workload. Overtime in areas like dispatch, police, public safety are reflective of that, utilities, wastewater plants. And if an employee is not on staff doing the work, actually, the work isn't getting done.
That's
All
time.
right, I'll have a follow-up later. Thank you.
Further questions for the HR budget? Councilmember Scambaluri, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate your quick mention of the anti-racism training, and I was glad to see the announcement at the end of May that we're contracting with the Center for Equity and Inclusion. Can you share any more details about how that will unfold in the coming months?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. It's we're really excited about it. It's the Center of Equity and Inclusion out of Portland, Oregon, and they will be training all of us, department heads and you all, and the mayor and the clerk in virtual settings because of the pandemic, unfortunately, is still going on. The first is a 3-day kickoff. I think I don't have that in front of me. I apologize. I think it's 4 to 6 hour sessions over 3 straight days. And because of all the things going on with annexation and the budget hearings, we're going to be scheduling that in early fall and trying to accommodate your schedules. And then we will continue to have meetings with them on a regular basis for the next 12 months, refresher meetings where we continue to talk about various matters surrounding diversity and inclusion and anti-racism training. So it's an ongoing process.
Great. Thank you so much.
Further questions for the HR budget before we go to public for comment? Mr. President, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Boland. And I think as many department heads know, there's an opportunity for us to submit questions via another option as we move forward. But one of the things I want to ask tonight is, and sometimes I'll just be asking for more clarification, because some things you read it, it just sounds like a company form or something. But under employee relations, it says implement strategies to improve employee engagement, including coaching supervisors on their management practices. Please tell me what that means. Or what do you intend for it to mean?
Well, was that under our program of employee relations? Is that what you're referring to, Councilmember Sims?
It's in your budget presentation, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I don't think a day goes by in HR that we don't get a supervisor question on how do you deal with an employee who's late for work or any number of things. And so it could mean any number of things. And we're constantly training ourselves in HR to give good management coaching advice. Part of that training comes through the Society of Human Resources Management, which I was talking about at the beginning. 3 of us are trained in that. Management is not easy, and managing employees is not easy. I know you know, which from your many years at IU. So it could be any number of things on any given day. It's not a very direct question that I answered that. I apologize.
Actually, it's really not. That's what I was kind of getting at with regard to employee engagement. You sound more like supervisory engagement. And I guess that's supervisors to engage with the employees to talk about maybe an issue of tardiness or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions for the HR budget? Councilmember, first round, Councilmember Rallo, you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, Ms. Shaw, I'm curious to know if contracts with the FOP, for instance, could be amended with all parties consenting, the council, the administration, the FOP, to, for instance, increase salaries. Could that be in the form of an addendum?
That's probably a legal question. Yeah, it's probably a legal question.
Yeah. What's your view, though? In your experience?
I assume so if all parties are willing, but I would again defer to legal on that answer.
Okay, I'll ask it of legal too. Thank you.
I can answer it right now if you like. I'm
Oh,
here. Yes, it is.
Let's do that, please.
It is possible to reopen a contract if the parties wish to.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, further questions. I saw another hand. Do we have any more first round questions for HR? We'll go to second round. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank
3
you.
minutes.
I didn't understand a table that's for the ARPA budget allocation. It's on page 27 of the packet. It's right before the conclusion in your memo, Ms. Shaw.
There's actually a typo in that memo, Councilmember Smith.
Is it the capital outlays? Because I didn't understand.
Yeah,
that.
no, in fact, I cleaned that up on the presentation. If you have the slide deck as well, you'll see that I cleaned that up. I didn't understand it either. It was kind of an 11th hour mistake that it didn't get corrected. I apologize for that confusion.
Okay, I'll go back to the.
It should
the
just be a
slides
straight $500,000 in category 1 for the bonus
Okay.
pay.
Then I
Good
understand.
Good
Thank you.
catch, though.
Well, then I'll just go back to the paid family leave, if I may. So in my experience, when a professional employee is on leave, the other employees usually who are trained and who are familiar with processes usually pitch in and make up for that other employee being absent. So I'm quite surprised at this $85,000 price tag for the paid family leave, and wonder if that money couldn't be better spent elsewhere. So could you tell me, I know that you mentioned the Society of Human Resource Managers, and maybe there's some formula you used. I'm trying to wrap my head around why it would actually cost this much.
So we made assumptions based on past usage of paid family medical leave for the 2 reasons I cited, new births and adoptions. And we made assumptions that if a person was and not in a position for a period of time, we would have to do something. We have, as you know, we have minimum staffing levels in certain areas like policing, dispatch, utilities. We can't run a water plant or a wastewater plant without employees. So you're right, probably professional employees just figure it out. But a lot of our staff have minimum staffing requirements. So I think we just made some assumptions. And from personal experience, when we've had people out on maternity leave in HR, I mean, the work either doesn't get, we all chip in together, but the work doesn't get done necessarily. We get behind. So there is a cost to someone being absent.
Is the number of and length of leave, was that like based on 2019 or some figure that of the city of Bloomington employees that used?
We had to make some general assumptions to come up with that number, and also based on some research we did to see what other cities and towns are doing throughout the state and throughout the country. I didn't really have an opinion when we started the research, to be honest. But the 6 weeks seemed like a reasonable number based on what we read and researched.
And can the paid family leave be used for elder care?
That is currently proposed, but that's one of the reasons we're asking for the first 3 quarters of 2022 to figure out the best way to move forward.
That's time.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw.
The beeper seems to be off. I don't know what's going on there, but further second round questions for HR. Going once. Councilmember Rosenberger, you'll have 3 minutes. We can't. Hello?
I'm muted everywhere.
There you are.
I'm back. I just had a question if we're including people who are fostering, like getting a new foster child in the leave.
We haven't specifically said that, but that's a really good point, which I also support. Thank you.
Further questions on the HR budget before we go to the public? Seeing none, we'll go to the public for comments on the human resources budget. You'll have 2 minutes. Please state your name for the record. And if you're interested in speaking, use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat. Ms. Lacey?
It looks like we have one taker presently, screen name Greg Alexander, who should be able to unmute.
Mr. Alexander, go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you. My name's Greg Alexander. I really have to insist we shouldn't think about maybe doing parking cash out next year. We should actually do it this year. We've known about this for decades because IU does it, and it's extraordinarily effective. It's why we have such an effective bus system in this town is solely because IU charges for parking. That is the number one thing driving bus usage here. And you know, we just we have this transportation demand management plan starting up, and for that we're supposed to be going around to other employers, to private employers, and telling them to do this. Well, we should be leading the way. The city should be doing this. We've known about this. Council members have supported it for so many years. It's time to just do it. It's not a hard thing to do. It's basically budget neutral. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further public comment on the human resources budget?
I don't see any additional raised hands, and I do not have any messages in the chat.
Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds. If you'd like to speak to the human resources budget, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat, and Ms. Lacey will acknowledge you. Seeing no other members of the public who wish to speak, we'll come back to the council for debate on the HR budget. Is there any member who'd like to speak to it before we take our first recommending vote of the night? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I really would like to know more details about the paid family leave. I think it's wonderful that this is being proposed and proposed to be funded. I think it's a really great idea. I think 6 weeks is relatively short, and I would really want assurances that elder care is covered, because I think that's almost as frequent a problem or an issue as childcare. So I think given that there are so many, that I have so many questions about that, I will be passing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate from members? Councilmember Flaherty, 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you again, Ms. Shaw, for the presentation. And I share some of the comments that Councilmember Piedmont Smith just did. I think it's a promising step to include paid family leave as part of the 2022 budget. I guess I would hope for perhaps a more comprehensive policy and one that extends longer. And I guess I'll just note that my general orientation for these budget advance meetings, A, is to probably ask most of my questions in writing, and B, to likely abstain from due pass recommendations when I still have outstanding questions that I'm trying to get answered. So I'll be abstaining tonight on the HR budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate on the HR budget? Going once, going twice. If not, I'll take an opportunity to say that I think that the concept of parking cash out has been misunderstood. It's really very simple. We shouldn't be subsidizing parking permits, at least not at the rate of $2 a year for City Hall employees. We should be charging the rate that the market will bear for that parking, and then giving every employee who is accustomed to parking in that lot a raise equal to the amount that we should charge the public. That way there's no loss to the employee. It's just as before. We should have to take into account whatever tiny tax hit they might take on a permit that's worth $60 or $150 or $200 a year. But for those people who do choose to find another way to get to work, whether by walking, biking, carpooling, or taking the bus, they get a de facto, but not an actual raise. It's only if they choose the healthier alternative, the alternative that's healthier for the environment and for themselves and for the city. So I agree with the member of the public who said that there's no reason why we can't do this right now. We certainly should be able to do it with the 2022 budget. So I'm not sure whether this is the place where it should be done or the controller's office. So, you know, I'm not ready to accept the budget as presented tonight. This is a straw poll that we're doing. But I'm confident that such a program, which is basically a neutral hit to the budget. There's no net effect. to the budget. It's a very small thing we could be doing right now. I'm disappointed that it's not in the budget for 2022. So with that, if there's no other debate on this budget, we'll have a straw vote. I will call members as I see them on my screen. Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo, Councilmember Rallo,
Sorry, pass.
Councilmember Scambaluri,
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Pass.
Councilmember President Sims,
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty,
Abstain.
Councilmember Smith,
Abstain.
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Chair Volin, I
Yes.
believe if I could ask Mr. Krebs to enable Councilmember Rosenbarger's video and audio.
Councilmember Rosenbarger, are you back?
She should be back.
You've been allowed to unmute and show your video, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, my internet stopped over here. Okay,
Understood.
I'm an abstain tonight, so thank you.
Okay, and I'm a no. So what is the total tally from the clerk? I believe I counted 4, 1, and 4. Is that right?
No, it would be 3, 5, and 1.
No, 3, 1, and 5. There were 5 abstentions. Right?
It's in the order of yes, yay, nay, and pass.
Right.
So it would be 3 yays. Oh,
1 nay and
yes,
5
1 nay
abstentions, yeah.
and 5. Sorry. Yep.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
We're going to now move on to the next budget. I believe that is, I've lost my screen here. The legal department.
Yes.
Philippa Guthrie, Corporation Counsel. Hello, welcome.
Hello, good evening.
You're going to have, I think, 10 minutes.
Yep.
All right.
Just
Please go
make
ahead and
sure
get started.
Let me make sure I can share my screen. Here we go. I had this trouble earlier.
It takes a little time. Okay.
You can see it. Wonderful. Yay. Philippa Guthrie, Corporation Counsel. Thank you for your time tonight. The legal department at the city is essentially an in-house legal department or a law firm. We provide cost-effective advice on most issues that face the city of a legal nature, except for the most complex that require specific expertise that we may not have in-house. We have 13 full-time employees. We have 3 divisions, the legal, the human rights, and risk. And we have several major initiatives this year and ongoing. They include annexation, which you're well aware of, advice on major redevelopment projects, for example, the hospital site, advice on COVID management and recovery and federal funding related to that. So that would be the CARES Act and ARPA, particularly eligibility with ARPA. It's very complicated. Reducing risks always through a risk department and supporting the city's goals for sustainability and climate action and equity and inclusion. And the way we do that is primarily by supporting all of the departments where the substantive projects related to sustainability, climate action, and equity and inclusion generally reside. For our 2021 budget goals, legal counsel is general advice, and you can see what those goals are. This screen, legal and policy documents, relates to basically how much time we spend and our goals for drafting documents, whether they be ordinances or contracts. One of the things that was different this year was rewriting of the utilities policies, procedures, and standards of service, which has already been accomplished. That's been done. We are also, there's a sustainability goal that actually is one of the few kinds of goals that we have been able to say is substantively a legal goal, and that's trying to digitize our records. And we are working on that. It will not be completed by this year, but some steps will have been taken, and we are starting to input legal documents to the document management system in the third quarter. Litigation, our goal is always to do the best we can for the city in regards to litigation. We are also looking at a tracking system for litigation tracking, and that's an ongoing goal as well. Human rights. One of the things I would just highlight here is that a goal for this year was to increase the Human Rights Commission's social media presence, and they now have a website, or sorry, a Facebook site with regular postings. Risk, we are working on always training because it helps prevent accidents. So there's a focus on that. And then the rest of our goals are related to reducing injuries and costs. The 2022 budget goals, I would highlight on this one, you've already heard that we are looking next year at collective bargaining agreements for both the Fraternal Order of Police and AFSCME unions. We would do another client survey next year, as we will this year in Q4. This is a new goal at the bottom there, is creating a template for training board and commission members on their roles and responsibilities. That seemed to be a good goal for legal, since there are legal advisors for every statutory board. So we spend a lot of time with those boards and commissions and try to understand their procedures. With the policy documents, one of the goals for this year is entering into our city database of city-owned properties, all the deeds that we had being stored in paper files that were destroyed under our document destruction policy in 2018. There are lots of deeds, and that's going to be an ongoing, we are starting it this year, but it's going to be ongoing next year. And I just wanted to highlight that the image there is of the Waldron. That is a deed that we acquired this year. This is to highlight that we are going to continue next year as well, inputting legal documents and digitizing. And that's an image of our current storage room, which in 2018, just before we destroyed the documents that were appropriate for it, it was literally packed to the gills. And that was one of 2 rooms. We're now down to just that one. Litigation, again, it's to achieve the best possible results for the city. And again, we will be trying to digitize our litigation tracking. I wanted to highlight this image too. This is the courtroom at the Supreme Court of Indiana. And I put that image in because municipalities don't get many chances to appear before the Indiana Supreme Court, but this year, well, in the last few years, the city had the opportunity to do that twice, and we won both times. The first was the Holcomb suit related to the annexation, and that was argued by Mike Hooker, our city attorney. And the other suit was a zoning matter, the UJ 80 case, which was argued by Larry Fallon. Human rights, that's a picture of Barbara McKinney, our human rights director. She ensures that we are complying with civil rights laws and maintain the highest ethics across the city. There are 2 different goals this year. We try to put, sometimes our goals are the same for some of our divisions, and it's just because there are things that we are able to measure. But we have two new ones for next year. One is with Human Resources, updating the personnel manual. And the other is to continue maintaining a high rating in the annual Municipal Equality Index, which I hope you are aware, we issue a press release every year, but for several years running, it has been 100. Actually, it exceeded 100 most of the years, but they only report up to 100. So again, risk is to, the responsibility is to reduce physical risks as much as possible. And we do that primarily through training and prevention activities. We do have a different goal in 2022, which is we have a new third-party administrator for our workers' compensation administration, and we will continue onboarding that administrator. We are very happy with them, and they're less costly than our previous. And we are doing an insurance review this year, and we may end up with a different insurance company as well. That's every few years we do an insurance review. Again, this is risk, so it's managing managing risks by training, and we will be adding a couple of different kinds of approaches that our risk manager recommends. And our goals are to reduce recordable injuries by 5%, workers' comp costs by 5%, and insurance claims by 3%. The legal department's budget request is $2,119,596, which is an increase of about 2%, which comes almost entirely in the personnel services category. This is the budget summary. And you can see the 2% increase. So the 2022 legal department's budget request reflects increases that align with the stated goals of providing the city and its boards and commissions with excellent, cost-effective legal advice that minimizes the risks for the city's employees and residents, and supports the city's goals for sustainability and climate action and equity and inclusion. Thank you for your consideration of our budget request, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. If you would unshare your screen, we'll go to members for questions on the legal budget. Are there any questions from members? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Ms. Guthrie. I was wondering about the goals under risk, reducing OSHA recordable injuries by 5% and workers' comp costs by 5%. What are the current, what is the number of injuries in a typical year, or in maybe the most recent year, 2020? And the same for workers' comp. Can you give us some context for those stated goals of reductions?
I can't actually, it fluctuates. I will have to ask our risk manager, and I can get you that in writing after the presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be good to put into context. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Further questions on the legal budget? Councilmember Sandberg, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Guthrie, this might be thinking a little bit further ahead in the future, but with respect to any litigation regarding annexation, will that be done in-house, or will that require any additional outside legal counsel to handle any of those remonstrances?
So that is one of the areas that requires special expertise. I will say that having started in 2017 and doing now a rebirth, if you will, in 2021, we have internal expertise, but we are not annexation litigators, and it really is very specialized. So we will still be using the services of Bose McKinney and Steve Unger, who I think you all have met at least once. There may be portions or pieces that we will be able to do in-house, and we will just have to see. We can't even tell whether we will have litigation, and if so, how much or what type. So
So that will just be pending the results of what occurs once annexation
Yes.
is determined.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on the legal budget? Councilmember Smith, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. I just, will you again say some more about the third-party administration? That went by me too fast.
Oh, that is, the third-party administrator is the entity that when we have workers' comp issues, injuries, they are submitted to the TPA. And believe me, I'm not a workers' comp expert, so if what I say is not quite correct, I'll make sure to talk to our risk manager about it because he deals with this on a daily basis. But the TPA evaluates the claims. It's a way of removing it from the city making the decision about whether this is a workers' comp issue, a workers' comp eligible injury, and then what the value is, and the TPA handles a lot of the communications with insurers, although we're self-insured for workers' comp, but with other parties like the medical personnel.
Does the TPA function kind of as a neutral party in,
Yes,
in the
yes.
Kind of as a go-between between everybody? Because the cities obviously then would have a bias, not in a negative way, but it would be biased to see those things decided in their favor. So the TPA is used as kind of a neutral party.
Yes, it's that, and also it serves an administrative role.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from members on the legal budget? President Sims, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Guthrie. Can you tell me, with regard to employee conflict forms, what is the average time it takes to address such a form or such a complaint on that form or such an entry?
So do you mean the conflicts forms that employees fill out when they think that they have a conflict? That's what those mean. The other one that is
review all
referenced-
employee conflict forms.
Right.
What
Yes.
what is that?
That is, if you, as an employee, believe that perhaps outside employment or an outside activity might pose a conflict to your duties at the city, then you should file a form, and it goes to Barbara McKinney, our ethics officer, and she looks at it to see whether there is a conflict. It is technically a conflict is a financial interest usually, but it can also be the appearance of a conflict. So for example, let me tell you that I serve on the Cardinal board as a board member, and I recused myself from discussions about the Waldron when it became clear that they might be, looking to manage it. And I filed a conflicts form.
So these are conflicts of interest forms,
Yes.
not conflicts because my human rights or civil rights have been violated. And I filed.
Right. No.
So you can see my confusion on that
I do,
language,
sorry.
I guess. Okay.
It's conflict of interest. I guess I left off the word interest. I apologize.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much for your answers.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions on the legal budget? Going once, Councilmember Flaherty, 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, Ms. Guthrie. Would you be able to expand at all on the goal of creating a template for training board and commission members on their roles and responsibilities? What you're envisioning there?
Yeah, so members who join a board or commission aren't always aware of, for example, that there are rules of procedure for their meetings, that they are somewhat independent from the city, but that also a lot of city policies may apply to them. So for example, conflicts of interest. So it would be instruction or a brief training that just gives them an idea of the kinds of things that they need to be aware of in their service for that board.
And is this part of, that sounds good, thank you. is this, I know the city generally has been reviewing boards and commissions and thinking about how they function and how we organize their work and utilize them at the city. Is this part of that sort of overhaul, or was it something separate?
I suppose you could say it is, yes. It was a conversation actually that Mary Catherine Carmichael and I had, because she helps the office of the mayor develop appointments and figure out, where to place people. And so it was, I don't remember the exact context, but it was about a board and commission that had asked us a question about how to proceed. And we thought, we probably we owe them some training, I think, because they're just kind of put on boards and commissions, and they rely on the other members who have been there for a while to help them, but that maybe we ought to take a more active role, so that like an orientation as they do for new employees.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Further questions from members on the legal budget? Going twice. With that, we'll go to the public for comment on the legal budget. If there's a member of the public who would like to speak to the legal budget for 2022, please use the raise hand function in chat, or type, or the raise hand function in Zoom, or type into the chat. Ms. Lacey, are there any takers?
I do not believe we have any takers.
Last call for public comment on the legal budget. Seeing none, we'll come back to the council for debate on the legal budget. Are there any comments from members? Councilor Piedmont Smith, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the idea of an orientation and training for board and commission members. I think that would be a great addition and very helpful for those community volunteers. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilor Varello, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Guthrie, my abstention this evening is not a reflection of the good work that you and your team do for the city. Thank
you. Councilor Flaherty, 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo the thoughts of Councilmember Piedmont Smith there, that I think a training and some sort of onboarding for board and commission members is a great idea and much needed. And I'll just mention, I serve as the council's appointment and seat on the Commission on Sustainability. And I know that commission has become sort of energized and active in the last, let's say, 6 to 8 months. And there's a handful of working groups that are trying to engage with the budget process and that sort of thing. And have been asking me some questions. And I find myself a little at odds to tell them, to advise them exactly how to engage, or how to advise the council or advise the administration, and have sort of deferred to saying perhaps reaching out to Deputy Mayor Griffin and President Sims. But I think maybe even beyond legal duties and responsibilities, working on shoring up how especially advisory commissions do in fact advise and interact with both the council and the office of the mayor would be great. So maybe that's something that we can do in tandem, or as part of, again, a broader overhaul of how the city utilizes and works with boards and commissions. I've sort of been thinking this for a while, but holding off on trying to implement something because I know we're looking at these processes. So just a thought that I think that's a really good step. So thank you.
Mr. President, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I won't need that much. I just want to also say thank you, Ms. Guthrie, for the work you and your office does, and vital in the city, I think, and what we do. And I'll just piggyback on the last 2 comments that I've heard with regard to boards and commissioners boards and commissions training. How do you envision that to be implemented? Is that, because every board and commission has a legal representative of some sort, or most of them. So is that the conduit for the training, boards and commission training? Is that through the legal representative of each, or what is your vision on how we were to implement that board and commission training?
Well, my vision would be—
And coming to the council president is not the answer.
That was my vision. I'm sorry. Gosh. it would be a combination, I think, of Mary Catherine or someone, you know, in her type of position and perhaps a legal person, because there are often legal issues. Some of the boards and commissions do not have legal standing legal advisors. So the advisories, for example, that Councillor Flaherty mentioned, it's primarily the ones with significant legal implications, and that's the statutory boards. But I think it would be some combination, kind of a team approach, probably. We have to develop the training, I guess, before we decide who's going to deliver it, since we haven't developed it yet.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much.
Further comments? The one thing I'll say is that I believe that I spoke earlier this year to Mary Catherine Carmichael about taking part in that board and commission training. So I'm glad to hear that the legal department is involved with that as well. And I am looking forward to seeing like a permanent standing program to introduce board and commission members to their duty. The new CAPS commission certainly had their work cut out for them. And they just to learn what it was to serve on a commission, let alone to create one from scratch. So it's definitely a function that's needed. If there's no other comments, we'll go to a straw vote on the legal budget. I'll start in reverse order, the way I see people on my screen. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Scambaluri.
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo.
Pass.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. That budget is 801. Thank you, Ms. Guthrie.